emission or reducing of our national emissions, or contributing to making the weather to 1.5 degrees. I mean, the temperature 1.5 degrees, but not more than 2 degrees. But generally speaking, it's our emissions that the country is churning out for different activities. I mean, 5 sectors for which are followed as well. And the following is agriculture, forestry, other land uses. So in order for us to be able to do that, we have to set some targets. And that are both specifically for the forestry. You may also be aware that in September 2022, we submitted the second for the updated NDC certain targets. But to make it even more clear is that forestry makes a contribution within that follow to the national GHG emission reductions. What we normally see is pretended by climate change, carbon trade, for the Department of Climate Change, carbon trade, as it is currently being called. And so we keep setting targets, and we are supposed to deliver on those targets. So in 2022 September, we set certain targets. And the Eagle Poll is top tech sometime from last year to usher us into developing that, although any of us want to call it the second. You see, when you see NDC 3.0, it's not necessarily a number. It's number 3 submission, but in terms of the actual, because we had an intended, then we had a fact, then we had the intended, sorry, and then we had the updated, and now we have the second. You can also, it is idea the second NDC, but quite a bit of NDC. But my colleagues, the climate change, carbon trade department, they can make that more clear than that. And so we are now at the time where we're preparing to trial the NDC 3.0. And so we're trying to set the targets. But maybe just to let you know that the global discussion is that these targets for human adaptation are supposed to be as ambitious as possible. So we have an ambition. So we yearn to do better than the previous. And that's why you might be observing that most of our targets, even the NDP4 and all the other things we're talking about, are higher than somebody would imagine we can deliver. It's because we need to have higher ambition in order to even mobilize resources to deliver the goods, because we can never have enough. There's an opportunity, and somebody could see to the amount of money to deliver the ambition. So we can see the data. So usually, and also because the global emissions are increasing for different sectors, shall afford ought to be more ambitious. And then, but because of that, we've been struggling as a sector to make the clear contribution to NDC 3.1 in terms of targets. Struggling in the sense that we seem to have data that is not aligning with some of our framework documents. We seem to be having data that seems to be more than what actually we can actually. We seem to be having ambitions that are not as consistent with the different framework documents. And because of that, we decided to request WWF through NDC to get us consultant, provide us a report that fully integrated all process of the NDC development. And that's why we have a consultant hired under the realm of the FRECA project. Yes, the steering. And that's why we hired the consultant to help us really redefine our targets, because they are confusing even us within the sector. How can we then streamline them, how can we harmonize what we have in before, what we have in our aspirations of the 40 million tree campaigns, what do we hope to see under the agroforestry, because actually in NDC 2.0, we made some ambitious targets on agroforestry, but the indicators that we had were not as for us to be able to deliver that aspiration of agroforestry. So this is the time for us to define some of those such indicators like agroforestry. And this is the reason why we purposely asked the experts within the department, and of course we also have colleagues from the Department of Climate Change and our trade join us in this meeting, such that we can speak the same language, so that we can benefit from each other's expertise. And we also focused a lot on the, in addition to other colleagues with the department, provide support, even more than just the data. They are also the non-HG things or targets that we talk about in NDC here. Speak NDC. So we have some sociologists here, we have economists here. Economists are very vital identity for what targets we have in. Oh, they're the ones who make this happen on behalf of the people. But the ND people are much more related what targets we need to set for NDC aside. So we have a mix of experts here, people who are in the kitchen for the data, for example, also here. That is quite important. Where is this data available? Where is this information? See it? Something abstract. We have it somewhere. That's why we have also invited those specific experts in the lab to participate in this. And colleague, that is what I didn't want to go dive deep into the NDC processes. We have the presentation from the Department of Climate Change and Carbon Trade, here. But the colleagues who are here can just tell us why an NDC, for example. What have we so far? What is happening that side? Will they do steer the process of NDC, speaking of the country? We also have other things that have been coming up in the first roundtable meeting. For example, the issue of energy, for example. Who is supposed to report on that? Is it the Minister of Energy or is it the Ministry of Water and Environment Department? So that's the conversation that we also have to go today. But I just want to assure you that anything to do with this establishment of forest investors in whatever form, it's our responsibility to capture that data. We need somebody else to. So we normally, and that's the reason why the forest sector has been the center national biomass study for a very long time. Because we don't want, if we want to avoid a situation where it's data in different places and you cannot find it. So we're trying to put up a mechanism for other entities to deal with that connection because the most efficient manner as we can. but energy to, but emissions to do with because this plantation and the operation a bit more difficult, but they have adaptation covenants. Like when we are talking about NDC, we are not talking about it. So we also be discussing that. I don't know what the consultant discovered for this time. But we shall have the control. But for emissions occurring from burning of charcoal, for example, or use of improved energy technologies, that is the responsibility of the Ministry of Energy. So this is where we have to work closely, because they are the ones who develop technologies for requirements. And whether these technologies can reduce emissions or not, at what extent, something that they should be able to share with the climate change department under sector of energy. So the energy have got that kind of energy for climate, but also the energy as a result of lack of fossil fuels and the other energy like that. So, and those are things that the climate change department can clarify how they have been getting this data in the past now, but also the consultants have done into where finding this information. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to just bring this meeting into context, the visual maps, so that we don't have people asking themselves questions. Why are we here? We are here because the sector of forestry is one of the highest emitters. Generally, our follow sector, because when it comes to the conversation of climate change, it's our follow agriculture, forestry, and other land uses. But that follow sector is one of the greatest emitters, and yet it's one of those where there are opportunities to reduce emissions. So it is a very important sector as far as NDC operation is concerned. And that's the reason why when the consultants were having challenges to get data, they wanted to speak to us specifically. So there was a first roundtable discussion. It had everyone from different players, foresters and things like that. But now we've decided to bring this home to the Department of Forestry. But of course, we must have the climate change and carbon trade with us. So they are the pretenders of NDC preparation. And so we call them the referees in these processes, so they're able to say, no, guys, this is not as ambitious. Oh, and this is how we make this happen. Maybe it would be nice for you to do this and not do that. So this is why we have this Department for Climate Change and Carbon Trade with us as we move along. And so we have a data challenge. Edward is here. Team, which is the kitchen, home, dairy. They are always in the kitchen. This data. Other programs. We have a lot of other support programs, Red Plus and others that are supporting us, making sure we have good data, including some systems. We don't have them today. We have systems in place like the FOMIS, the waste, which is one of the modules, the waste for forestry, which also capturing different data from different places, sources, and all that information is useful for application. And get it also useful for application. So, which is the best information for us to use for NDC 3.4 preparation? That I'm sure the consultant has found out. And it's the reason why once he wanted to have a special meeting with us in forestry, so that we are able to agree on certain things. There were some recommendations in the first round table, there will be a presentation by Emily. And we need also to be sure that those recommendations are taking care of our aspirations as the forestry department, now that we have brought this conversation home. And then mistake we make, then this shall have issues, implications, repercussions during the time of implementation of this NDC 3.4. That's why we want to be careful, and that's why we decided to have this special meeting with all of you, and all of you are important. One thing I want to let you know is that we are being asked to have as much as possible younger people in these conversations of data? I don't know. So who is young in them? It's what the young or the young one. But we have been asked to make sure that we have younger people so that they join this whole, technical teams on appreciating data. And having interns, if they appreciate the issue of data, you never know, they may want to advance them, these kind of aspects of it. But it's one of the most interesting. You will never get bored. You get bored when you're in this area of data, because there's a lot of technologies, every other year we have new technology coming in, how to get data. One of these days you may just sit on your laptop and do everything. If we have good satellite imagery, better resolution of up to 0.5 meters. Now, what's the resolution for NASA?
They are very important now.
They're the one which is there.
And that's as good as 20 centimeters.
That's 20 centimeters, 0.2 meters. So it is possible with technology that you can do certain things in your room and you are able to do that. But for us, for example, we also want to move a bit, confirm a bit. Is that a eucalyptus? So it's something that's, so they want to do something big, but it will be cheaper to ground truth with better technology. So that's why we are here for this morning. And each of you has a contribution. I've always been encouraging to work with them. And each of you has something to say, everything. Whether what you say is that, but at least you can understand, you can learn something. That's what I'm trying to say. You can learn something from all this conversation. So I just wanted to make that very clear so that I bring into context this meeting. And then we continue from there. So that it's now 10 o'clock. I guess it is better we listen to the next presenter. I wrote the record for it. So we will, unless if somebody had a question, sometimes somebody might have a question to what I'll be submitting and what we have said before we continue. As you set up the next presentation or the conclusions, the first round, which you had on the 19th of June at the cellar. If you have any questions, please feel free. I'm seeing a hand or a pen. Okay, as you organize yourselves to see NDC plan. If your commissioner doesn't turn up in time, but he promised to come in, the assistant commissioner, charge of motivation and others. But in case it lays just feeling, then you cannot do that. Why? But what's slowly after, so Emily's going to. So Emily, are you ready? Please.
Good morning once again. It's not a PowerPoint presentation. I'll just be making the conclusions that emerged from the last meeting that was held on the 19th. As I said, it was a long table. One of the core issues involved around data and methodology issues. From that meeting, the inconsistencies in forest cover figures were noted, where some data sources indicate 0.6% as the current forest cover, and others indicate 12.4%. So from this meeting, we hope that we shall agree on which figure to actually take on and the source. Then the other issue was that we cannot adequately, the consultants cannot adequately track the forest data related to forest degradation. So only deforestation, data in regards to forest deforestation is captured. So we look forward to listen from this roundtable to the guidance that you give around this. Then also agroforestry, tree zone farm requires tracking plots less than 0.5 hectares. So there was also contention around this, whether to go with agroforestry or to consider tree zone farm. So this meeting can also clarify what was discussed in the previous meeting. Then the other was on the target discrepancies. We have our national government plan, the national planning framework, the fourth version, where it indicates that 250,000 hectares. The target is to cover 250,000 hectares for the 5 years. So it is a scope from where the NDC is up to 2030. This is what should be covered. But then there was a point of documentation of this not actually being the target that the forestry department or the custodians of the data will confirm, though it is under the national development plan. So also need clarity on this. Then there is an issue of gap, that is the 260,000 hectares uncounted for in the current plans. The consultants will elaborate on this, and we look forward to your guidance. Then the other issue was around capacity constraint. So here the issue is historical success is tied to grant programs. So the challenge here is that the capacity breaks when these programs end. So we are looking for clear recommendation towards this and how we can sustain the forest cover even after these programs that are supporting forest regeneration or the enhancement of the forest cover when they have come to an end. Then there is another issue that was noted on external funding. So planting volumes drop significantly. That means that as a country, we are depending so much on external funding. So it is a challenge whereby if we want to mobilize, we cannot maintain the trees actually we've planted. So we cannot grow the trees and reach our target of forest cover. And then there is also an issue of interministry coordination needed. So this is the coordination across regions that is that's highlighted. That is forestry versus agriculture. I think that is where we have the forestry. The forestry. And then the recommendations and the actions from that meeting. It was recommended, despite the confession and the figure that was presented in the NDP 4 of 250 hectares to be covered within the 5 years. It was recommended that if we go with this figure, then it should be the unconditional. So unconditional, it's not dependent on the external financing. Then the conditional would be now the 260,000 hectares, where if we are able to mobilize the external support or finance, this is the forest cover that we would realize in 5 years. Then there are key agreements that were reached on, that is adopt trees on farm terminology instead of agroforestry. So the consultants during that meeting were guided instead of considering agroforestry, they take on the term of trees on farm. Then the other was the forestry department, leads on the monitoring, reporting and verification and carbon sequestration reporting. Then agriculture focuses on resilience and productivity benefits. Then the other issue was to ensure no double counting between sectors. I think this is between the forest sector and also the agriculture sector. Then there was a recommendation made that the consultants need to consider the pipeline projects, and they were identified during that meeting. One being the partnership for forests, which highlights 1,980 hectares. Then the other is the results-based payments project, which focuses on which highlights areas on fuel wood, forests, and timber plantations. Then the third is the Italian Development Corporation, which brings out an issue of non-timber forest products, and it's estimated at 2,000 hectares. And the fourth project is the bamboo project, which is Chinese government funded. Then the National Forest Authority, NFA, community tree planting, which also highlights areas of formal initiative and community support. So those were the 5 projects that were identified for consultants to consider. I think as also sources of data. So that is all that was concluded during the previous meeting, that serves as a follow-up for this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emily, for that. I wish that could have been flashed on the screen. Is it possible? Because this is something that we want to spend some 5 minutes trying to reflect on.
Okay, let me share.
The experts here. Colleagues, you have heard, and I hope you can note of something that those conclusions from the first round table. Maybe by show of hands, who attended the first round table? Me too. I know there were a few people from the department and majority from it. There are 3 people in the room. The next one. When is it? I remember you had another one. No, we don't WWE. You're talking about it collective. Because WWE is by default, that's in the conversation. So just a few people attended. That's the reason why we wanted to also have more discussion about what came out of that roundtable discussion in terms of conclusions. Because they inform us of some data gaps, some of the things that need to work on today as well.
Chair.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on 2 issues. One is agroforestry versus trees on farm. Given that we've just concluded the agroforestry strategy as a country, which clearly stipulates what agroforestry is, and when you go deep into the strategy, it actually splits of trees on farm as a component, or as trees on farm as one of the and agroforestry. So to me, it is not something that should be debatable. Agroforestry carries much more weight than trees on farm. And we should be adopting the terminology for agroforestry. In that regard, we should be adopting the terminology for trees on farm and not, we should be adopting agroforestry instead of trees on farm. Then there was, I didn't pick it all as she stated it, but there was an issue of how we have an issue of sustaining agroforestry projects, because of sustaining forestry projects or restoration projects, because most of the funds come from grants, and when these grants cease, sustainability is affected. But we and the question was, what is it that we can do to ensure that we have continuous sustainability, or we have sustainability of these restoration initiatives? Looking at the current environment, I think we see that private sector is also playing a very big role in this restoration project. But where the problem is how government has deliberately taken on over the role of standardizing and ensuring that across the entire value chain, forestry value chain, we have standards that are in place and are actually being implemented. I'll give an example. We are promoting energy plantations, but we once worked on, for example, the charcoal guidelines, and we have the document, we have launched, implemented it. These are some of the things that are affecting the investors or the private sector from recouping from the sector. So how do we sustainably manage, or how do we sustainably ensure that we have these restoration initiatives successful and sustained? We have a role to play in government, and our biggest role is to ensure that the standards are in place and fully operational. For example, if it is charcoal, the standards should be known to the people and they should be operational. The bans that we have are not helping us, because illegalities continue to take place. And in the long run, they are affecting restoration initiatives. Yeah, so to me, the question of when the grants are out and they are over, how do we sustainably ensure that the forestry initiatives continue to thrive, is that we have to make sure that the standards are in place and the standards are operational to enable the private sector to report from the sector. And in that way, it will be successful.
Yeah, you're spot on, because when you look at what the sector can deliver, it's what the NDC, even the policy issues are quite important. If there are things that we can do in forestry that can reduce GHG emissions, those are also supposed to be mentioned in a real NDC. They're supposed to be mentioned in a real NDC. And also look at what impacts cause in terms of this GHG emissions. So we need to do some modeling. That's why there is modeling in NDC preparation. We need to employ some models in such a manner that we can analyze through modeling what impacts there will be cause in terms of reducing GHG emissions, generally speaking, as a forestry. You're spot on that. The issue of the standard, and I hope that the consultant has taken note of that. Yes, Derek.
Thank you for the presentation. But there was another issue which was put on the table for discussion, and it was on the reporting of trees on the farm. Like the consultants were saying that we shall be adding ourselves a lot of work to report on them, and we thought to do better discuss it. Yeah. So that we know whether we should carry on the trees on farm stock with our forestry reporting, or we stick to our classes for reporting. Thank you.
Colleagues, I know you might want to respond to that, right? But that is something that had some discussions. I guess, Brian, please.
Okay, thank you so much. It's not very different from what he has said, but just for clarification, I thought the meeting we had, maybe if I heard wrongly, but Emily said something about half a hectare. But I thought in the meeting we talked about half an acre. I think that's what I have noted twice. I don't know, maybe we will come to a conclusion on that. But that again affects what we are calling tree on farm and agroforestry, because I think if we are to go into agroforestry, because the people from Maive really wanted to be the ones to report on agroforestry because of the relationship with agriculture. Yeah, strategically, maybe they did want to, but then trees on farm are more of isolated woodlots and maybe trees set up for boundary demarcation and etc. Agroforestry is more focused on improving the productivity of the land. So at the end of the day, I don't know, like he said, a lot of work would probably be put into determining what these trees are being put up for, if they qualify for agroforestry or for trees on farm, because we don't know the purpose of why these trees are there in the first place. Maybe that's something that the Maive people would have more knowledge on. So I feel personally that reporting on trees on farm, after setting out the definitions, it would be good for us to reduce on how much we have to, go into the detail. That's my thought on that.
So what is possible from a technical point of view in terms of capturing data?
That's
What are we able to capture?
okay. That's something we were discussing earlier with Brenda, and also Derek. We talked about it, and when we were there at the meeting before, we are talking about the new technology that we've been using, sample area-based technology. But in mind of the area that we are looking at, it's half an acre or half a hectare. But still, given that the area of interest is the cultivated area, it would need a lot of samples for us to have something to, report on that is reflective of what is actually on the ground. And we are talking about capacity, shortfall, and all that. But I think at the end of the day, it will come down to the best methodology to use to approach this, because our contemporary methods that we're using now of satellite imagery did not really capture what we want at that scale of half an acre. Yeah.
Yes.
I happen to have had that. One, the issue of trees on farm and agroforestry without being adjusted, that is going to the term agroforestry. We will adjust it, but it's people using different words, but they are meaning the same. So that's one. And number two that came out of that meeting is the definition of the forest in this country. I remember Robert was very particular. We use 1 hectare for Uganda's future forest. What it implies is that the 0.5, 0.7, 0.8 are all being missed out when we are doing what mark in the cover assessment, cover assessments. So we need to look at information myself. Is 1 hectare working for us and going forward? That is something that we critical to look at. Otherwise, a lot of areas are now seeing stuff. Otherwise, that's for the 5 as forest. We use an example with Oh. So that's one. Number two, this issue of the ministerial coordination that is shared with the agroforestry strategy has collaborated with Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Environment, collaborating to implement the agroforestry activities as a board. Because when you go deeper in agroforestry and agriculture, those small, some of which will not be under our mandate. But if we go deeper into the streets of farm and what have you, then that's really sits well with our mandate. But the most important thing is our capacity to come with our inventory unit and the GIS. When we look on the other side of it, we may be making an assumption that it's in the development capacity. We have an inventory team that has work for 20 years. Now we are working this out and capture simple measures. Responsibility and at the end of the day, they don't. The issue of energy plantation, the Ministry of Energy, they are more looking at the technology. So the energy plantations again comes from advance. We are not going to be that responsible. Because it starts replacing the the planting material from okay. It's the forestry people who know species that will give the rate. Energy because of the technology for the conversion of maybe the wood biomass, charcoal, and then so this is an area again we need to look at deeply. Then the other is what Brian has alluded to. We are still having the challenge of capturing this data. First, what is the first practical for capturing this data, all this information is information system. And it came down to one host, and it also came down to the kind of technology. We have the technology that can capture information that is in the forest systems. Brand here say currently we can't do that meeting unless we advance and go high technology. That's how we capture something. That has the financial implication.
What do you think? You know, there's been a discussion, and this is where I think we're going to tell the PS about this. That we wanted to go to a data conference for Uganda. Because we have all these questions, all these unanswered questions. If it's about the technology, what do we need? If right now, the donor asks us, what do you need to be able to capture that detail? Be able to. Because there are many people who want to support us. By the way, and everybody aware. So many people are free, the European Forest Institute, and many other people in this state. And we need to be specific. What do we need from them? They should not come and support us with the obvious things. I think they should come and focus on the things that we can't do. You know, and we want to challenge all those fellows who are coming to Uganda to say you want to support the country you are moving your data. Yeah, because we have an agroforestry strategy. We have the issue of inability to capture that detail of the data that we can call it agroforestry data. And so what do we need? We need to redefine the forest now for this entity to it's impossible. Yes.
Should be a repository.
Yes, that's going to be future improvement, future plan. The next 2 years or so, we can say what to find it. But also, we discussed this in Ginger. I know everybody will that. In Ginger, we had a very interesting engagement on the register. And in that conversation in Ginger, somebody raised the issue of definition of the forest. And we're saying that if we are to define our forest, we reduce the area. Because area is one of the most important. They cannot be covered, yes, but not as critical as also cannot be covered 30%, and above. The height of 4 meters, that's the big. That is what makes it clear the forest, kind of 5% of the forest. And then the size of the area, which is 1 hectare for that examination. But if we are to reduce that size, are we able to capture that? That was the question. Because then we might define our forest and outcome of our forest cover is even much less because we can't capture much less than what is exactly if we cannot capture the information less than the hectare. So that's the conversation. And so we need to, and some countries leave it at that for purposes of being able to collect the information. Otherwise, we started this conversation with John Belguman, I think it was from about 3 years ago, to say, should we redefine it? So me, I was already presented Sinamane, which sits in this room, to say, senior colleagues, as a country, we want to redefine the forest. And these are the implications, the pros and cons of it. But for us to be able to redefine it, in order for us to capture everything on the forest on the line, we need to have the foreign tools. We need to have the foreign equipment. We need to have a certain critical mass of people who are able to collect this data and analyze it. So I wanted to throw the challenge in my time. But then we said, again, let's wait a bit and because it's a challenge that we distort our assessments at the moment. If we resolve it by definition only. So this is why we are having it over. We have not done, but as we move forward, I think some, and I was asking Edward, who's the guy who has been this data came for a long time. What do we need to do? First, we present it, the minister will present it to everybody and say, this is what, if this country show you and tell you the exact forest cover, this is what we need. Otherwise, we shall be giving you estimates. Ourselves don't trust. So Edward, please say something on that. The forest definition, so maybe some progress.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I agree with my the submissions. Especially from the issue of the forest definition, we set it at 1 hectare after considering all the variables that relate how the data is acquired by the various institutions. That is the government authorities, MPAs, our international partners like the UNFCCC, FAO, World Bank, and the others. Vis-a-vis the technology available to have that data captured in a well-structured scientific way, which is supposed to be reproducible. Somebody should be able to verify and verify. And after looking at all those factors, capacity, internal capacity, human resources, ICT equipment, the availability of data imagery, and the capacity to analyze them, so that 1 hectare so far is so. Because the moment you lower the threshold area, let's say to 0.5 years, the first thing that is not change the percentage first cup of the country. It's going to shoot up because every small thing now becomes forest. So you have a task of convincing the UN, World Bank, and the FAO to have been mounted in our percentages now up to 0.6. And now let's use up to basis at 5%. That one becomes an actual task. Secondly, for you to go below half a hectare, you need very high resolution imagery, which is still, unfortunately, it is for buying. The 10 meters you're working with under the Sentinel, Landsat, those are freely available. Anybody can go and download a student, you at home, you can just log in, just like log into TikTok and download. They are totally free, but very good at their level. But they stop at that limitation of land size stops at 30 meters resolution, which is good for big forests which are 1 hectare and above. Then Sentinel can help us to do a bit lower because it's a bit sharper in the resolution. So, what do you need? The first thing you need is a human resource. The human resource we have as government, as Ministry of Water and Environment, is not enough to tackle that assignment because we're already struggling with the 1 hectare. We're already struggling. This land cap is supposed to come up annually, but we are still doing it by annually, and even then we are not consistent. For example, we're supposed to have produced the 2025 plan cover, but because of various factors, minus effects, we are not able to do it. It requires a big team. It requires good processing power in terms of computing. It requires good software. And I'm very sure that a good number of people know the challenge we have been having with the software and the procurement when I hope. So if we can up the game on our human resource, increase the teams that is handling the data, we put in place the infrastructure that we use, the computer, the servers, and the software, then only then can attempt to go below half the mapping, because this is like sitting your exam. You say our definition is half hectare. The third party guys from UNFCCC, all those who are going to come and buy your carbon, will be sending verifiers to come and check you in your own country or your own work. So you should be able to produce something will be able to stand the scrutiny. So that means to do that, you have to be very well prepared in terms of human resource, ICT, licenses, and of course buying the necessary, which is square kilometer is now about almost $20 per square kilometer. Uganda is, I mean, we're in thousands of square kilometers. That's a huge budget for them. With our partner FAO, we find access to something called Free, where we had access to images of about 4 or 5 meters. It was sharper than Sentinel, so we could be able to see so many other small workloads. But that access, when the project ended, the access was also gone to the end of the project. So are we able to have that access as government consistent with such people reporting, people for the MRL, you're supposed to people reporting so that you're able to look at the trends. Is a profession improving or is it deteriorating? Because agriculture and culture they're like the equal cousins. Usually agriculture gets into forestry. So, and for government, it's very critical to monitor the past trend. How much is agriculture what's real? I only do that when I've got a good time to share this information. So, Chair, it's about this, those various mentioned, and then, yeah, let's try and do that.
Is there going to be a final wrap up on this?
Just maybe this from the presentation you talked about the size of forest and the life there. If we look at, if we are to report on now the other move now, which have been converted to furniture, most of now the supply of the biggest supply of groundwood or timber is coming from the forests. We are not monitoring. So now how credible will our data be if we have to report on them? Because now the timber you are buying from one state is coming from those small so half an acre. So we need to advise means if it means increasing our forest cover by adopting redefining our definition, we redefine it, we increase our forest cover. Then when we are tracking that this year we have lost a lot of forests And these are the ones we report on them. Other than us remaining with our 12.6, when the reality on the ground is different. Because they ask you, where are they cutting trees? For you to be able to tell those other woodlands in the community where the trees are coming from, becomes a bit difficult. So maybe it is just for us to open our minds and we see how we can do that. Because otherwise, one day,
By the way,
the president will be there and will ask you something like
by
that.
the way, if I've been telling everybody in the senior, one of the most critical, most important segment of the sector is data segment, because one day I was being tasked to publish data back to the team or that side, years ago, 1.5 years, 1.5 years ago. 14% said no. You cannot be put in. I don't have a concern. When you look at the trends, can't go there, can't street that. We have those challenges that some people see as being all these two black across the country. And they say, what we're doing so much with this, there must be. But you see, it is you have to go to compare it with the rate of loss, the rate of deforestation, the rate of degradation. These are all statistics or data that you need to feed into the NDC. And that's why there is modeling this NDC story. Correct. And so the consultants who work on NDCs have to appreciate the use of assumptions and the use of models to project, but also factor in the current situations, the national circumstances. So we have all these issues, colleagues, but yeah, we have thrown a challenge to ourselves. And I think we need again to discuss this, but for the comfort of the NDC representatives.
Something which I'd like to come up with is because I want to respond to this concern about the thing is the percentage of forest cover will not necessarily take the supply. The thing is where this food is coming from is may not actually be appearing in the percent of Ghana. So the key thing we have to do, okay, let's assume that we don't have money to buy those very high resolution images. Then you have to go to planning, which means you intensify your ground truth, meaning that every woodlot in each district must be visited and GPS points are taken. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of motorbikes. You go hunting for these woodlots wherever they are. Because that's the process alternative. But again, you should see that it's already a very large logistical challenge. You need riders, you need who are foresters who come out to collect forest data and pick the data correctly so it can be used. But there's also a possibility here that if Uganda intends to change the, let's say, air liquid reduce it, Uganda as a country can decide to buy a one-time national mosaic of, let's say, 20 centimeters for the whole country. And then you spread a new baseline. Then the team works with it and they see the possibility of actually adopting it so that you don't just go in with both feet without testing the data. So that one is possible, but just people as a government or a full ministry, not just one department, because it can be very expensive. But the good thing is that data set can serve all other purposes of government, starting from informing agriculture, profit distribution, national parks, Our issues to do with forest boundaries, our own forestry, so it can be put to use by so many other MPAs. So it can be justified. We're not the only working here, but other members can also have access to it. So that's what I bring it up as a possibility to kind of jump into experiment and see, and we do it.
Thank you so much. Please allow me to bring this to a close now, right before our committee. And this are the results here. You can attempt to watching anyway. You can attempt, and it's a bit difficult, but let's try our best. Please, you're welcome. You can just speak one by one, so that you don't overcrowd on the table. By the way, we are still in the additional 21 days of Ebola. Yeah, because we're supposed to have ended on 23rd of June, but it means we have another 21 days. So we can still continue to do some distancing. Because we don't know who did what. Where?